and begin our Kickstarter discussion looking at 25 years of the East African community. What does it mean? Where are we? And what should we be looking out for? There are leaders across the region who have been hammering down the fact that integration and political federation are very important and should be fast-tracked and achieved as soon as possible. But the bottlenecks and the challenges that we face as countries in achieving integration and a federation continue to rear an ugly head. Joining me this morning is EALA MP Jacqueline Amongin. Honorable, you're most welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Chris.
How are you doing?
I'm okay. So thank you so much for having me this morning. And I would like also to take this opportune moment to congratulate the King of the Kabaka
Buganda
of Buganda for the 31 years as the Kabaka of Buganda, and of course we would like to wish him well as he continues to serve the people of Buganda, but also the people of Uganda. Indeed, yes.
No doubt about that.
Yes.
Now, this is Silver Jubilee, 25 years of the East African community. You are the Member of Parliament right now. I want you to first give us a preamble of where we are, how we are moving, before I can even start to lament about the challenges that we are facing as a region in achieving integration and federation.
Of course, yes. Kenya has already introduced me. Amongin Jacqueline is my name, from the National Parliament now to the East African Legislative Assembly. And I'm very excited to be, first of all, on this show because really issues of integration have to be given keen attention, even by the media.
That's right.
And of course, looking at the questions that you've answered, where are we? We need to take the people back, especially the listeners right now, of where we started from. And of course, as you know, that the pillars of the EAHC or the East African community involve the common market, the customs union, the common currency, and eventually the ultimate political federation.
Yeah.
So you have to have the end in mind. And it is assumed that when we have gone through all these stages, then the region will be very ripe to have an ultimate political federation.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the common market. Common market is whereby we are talking about East Africans enjoying trade together, trade barriers removed, and then we can go to Tanzania. I'm gonna use simple English because I know the listeners out there are also interested in knowing what is happening.
That's right.
For example, I come from that is Teso. So most of the people who buy our oranges, you will find all vehicles coming from Kenya to buy like oranges, to buy like maize flour, to buy like cassava, without any hindrance in the border.
That's right.
So if you go to the Kenyan border, you'll find that there are fleets of trucks. But those have to be because before we were federating, it was not just free entry and exit.
There was a lot of
hassles you had to go through in order to access Uganda border, or in order to access Kenya, or in order to access Tanzania, or in order to access in business. So that was the goal of our founding fathers of the East African community, so that East Africans can freely trade together. And then we also had the customs union. Customs that you're free to move to any place without any hindrance. Free movement of people and goods. That's why, as a member of the East African community, and also all of us are members of the East African community, but I think as a member of the East African Legislative Assembly, I'm a frequent traveler within the 8 countries in the region. Most times I am on move. I'm either crossing to South Sudan, crossing to Tanzania, coming to Kenya, going to Rwanda, going to Burundi. So you find that all these barriers are to a large extent being addressed in terms of accessibility to these countries, irrespective of what you're going to do.
Okay. I like it when you say these barriers are being addressed to a larger extent. The question that is critical is the pace at which the processes of addressing these barriers is seen by some as too slow and doesn't, of course, align itself well with the objectives and the aspirations of those who sat, especially in the reintroduction of the EAHC in 1999. So much so that after 25 years, we're still grappling with these issues here and there.
Of course, as you may realize that we are not exactly the same in terms of, first of all, our populations, our backgrounds in terms of the countries. So I would love to say I used to have the same thought that it would be immediate, so everything would be running fast and fast and fast. But I think that the bureaucracy is brought about by our differences in some instance, and the fact that we are sovereign countries also. So different issues, when they are tabled even to our parliament, and when it reaches, for example, if we passed a bill in the Parliament of East Africa, it has to go again to the Council of Ministers, of which all our ministers are represented. So our treaty talks about consensus must be by all the countries. So if it means an issue has to be passed, it has to be assented to by all the member countries represented by their ministers. If any member country does not, then that will not be taken up as an issue. So in such a scenario, everything has to take a slow pace, which we have to really understand. Sometimes even language. For example, right now we have got Somalia on board, we have got DRC on board, and we are talking about 8 countries from the original 3 countries, leave alone Burundi that has ceded to, and Rwanda at the same time, then South Sudan. But we are talking about from the original 3 countries of Uganda, Kenya and Tanzania, we now have 8. And then within our treaty, our language that is recognized is English. So when we are debating, for example, in the East African Parliament, you cannot start speaking Kiswahili, which would be our common language. But even if Kiswahili would be adopted as a common language, which I know even Uganda is trying through the president and cabinet recently endorsing that Kiswahili should be taken as a language that should be used in schools and teaching our children to adopt Kiswahili. Apparently it's Kenya and Tanzania that speak Kiswahili, so Uganda does not. So you find that the formal language is English. But in the process of all these other countries coming together, like now DRC and now Somalia,
it again presents another
scenario, because now DRC comes with French. Although Rwanda has been able to catch up, being a francophone, but now they are really trying hard to do English and Kiswahili at the same time. DRC comes with a different scenario, French, and Somalia actually comes with a different scenario of Arabic.
Let me ask this question, and it's one that I've put to very many analysts and those who are scholars on regional matters. The realities for each country are different, and we've seen that there is no point really for one country to pursue the interests of another country ahead of its own. It's usually our interests first and then the other second or third. In that mix, isn't it important that the framework of the East African community be realigned to the reality that not all aspects as envisaged in 1999 or even before, when the East African community first came into dispensation right from independence, we must be able to create a new model for the East African community, not one that requires, as is right now, for us to achieve what could be the United States of East Africa, so to speak. Shouldn't we begin rethinking? Because I'll tell you honestly, 25 years are enough for you to figure out things. If 25 years have gone and we are still asking for time to discuss and to thresh out these matters, then something is wrong. Do we need to change the model? Should we agree that countries must remain as they are, but then find the framework like the European Union does, like the United States does?
Okay, so first of all, we are talking about one of the RECs, the Regional Economic Communities of African Union. And one of the RECs is the East Africa, the EAHC, the East African Community.
Yep.
And then you need also to do comparison between the East African Community and the other regional blocks, including the SADC, the ECOWAS, and all that.
COMESA.
So in terms of moving forward, I would think that within the African Union, the EAHC is doing a great, although the population may not be, the population of the EAHC would want to see quick achievements within the EAHC, but I would think that compared to other regions, we are at a steady kind of progress. It has to be a gradual process. Looking at the dynamics that I have already highlighted, it has to be dynamic. First of all, Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania are the initiators of this federation.
Principle 3.
And then the fact that this is now open, eventually Ethiopia wants to join, because as the East African, according to the African Union, there are almost 14 countries that form the Greater Eastern Africa region. So that means the other countries that remain alone, and yet they are neighboring those that are already integrating, are fewer. And some of them may want to fall in SADC, but not very comfortable there. So that means eventually you will realize that there is the entry into force of Ethiopia, Djibouti, Madagascar, and the island, Seychelles. So it is a gradual process. However, in terms of the issues that were raised within the East African Community Treaty, you will find that infrastructure, we are talking about the EACOP, we are talking about the railway line, we are talking about these are proposals that are ongoing. But I want to say that we still have bigger challenges as the region. And one of the challenges I've already raised is the issue of language. And I know in the proposed fast tracking of phase 2 of the EAHC, or phase 3, there are so many amendments that are likely to come up. Among them including also setting a roadmap that let us work for a time frame where we know that now with these pillars of the federation, we talked about the common currency, so that when I go to Tanzania, I don't need to first again change my money of Uganda. I live here with dollars, then I go to Tanzania, I change dollars into Tanzanian shillings, because Tanzanian people will not accept my shillings of Uganda. I go to South Sudan, the South Sudanese cannot accept, and we are talking about common trade within East Africa. We cannot achieve common trade if we don't have a common currency. So this is an issue that has to be fast-tracked. Then some of the amendments will be brought on board, because there is already a committee that has been put in place to see the amendments, that when these amendments are popularized within the member states during the consultations, these amendments will be brought to council, back to Council of Ministers. And then after the Council of Ministers approving them, they will also relay them to the summit, the Summit of Heads of States. That will help us move faster. But I want to say that there is political will in terms of having this federation go forward. And I want to say that President Yoweri Museveni is one of the most top committed cadre in ensuring that this federation is steadfast. I'm really talking now as Uganda, representing Uganda in the East African Parliament. But also you look at Kenya, very committed, because the countries that really ensure that they appropriate money on an annual basis towards the East African integration activities, those are committed countries. Now, the challenges that we have are the new entrants. So you find that a country like DRC, since acceding to the treaty, to date, have never made any contribution.
Isn't that testimony to...
Apparently, South Sudan is chairing the Council of Ministers, and I'm sure by next year, due to the rotation arrangement in the treaty, South Sudan will also chair will be the Speaker actually of the Parliament, and will also be the Secretary General of the East African Community. So, but the process of remittance is slower. And then some of the projects cannot take off because over-reliance on donors alone may not simplify our problem. It needs total commitment of the members who have committed to be in the federation. So that's why you realize that the process is a little bit staggering. However, to me, I think because of our different backgrounds, the times of accession to the treaty of the different member countries could have brought all this, but I'm sure this is being worked on by the leaders of the summit of heads of states, and we will be on progress.
Okay, no doubt. Talking about the low-hanging fruits, we've already seen the fact that many Ugandans can travel across the borders of the East African community without necessarily having a passport, but using the national ID. That was a very good one. However, there are sticking points, especially with regard to trade. We now have a standoff, especially regarding fuel. The Minister for Energy and Mineral Development has been crisscrossing between Kampala and Nairobi, trying to discuss with the minister, the other side, and the powers that be on how best Uganda can be allowed to import fuel via Kenya without necessarily involving Kenyan middlemen who have been an integral aspect of this particular trade. Of course, no one wants to be destabilized or money taken away from their table, but still go through their house, and that is exactly where you must understand Kenya and Kenyan middlemen. I don't know whether you've had an opportunity to interface with the Minister for Energy with regard to this standoff and how best it can be resolved as soon as possible to allow for this trade to go on, because fuel is a very important aspect when it comes to running the economy. Have you had an opportunity to...
Yeah, I haven't had an opportunity to interact with...
Or is this conversation in the corridors in Arusha?
I haven't had an opportunity to interact with the Minister of Energy, but I've been following the fact that I've even just come back from our plenary from Arusha. Okay. So I haven't really had time to interact with the minister, but definitely Uganda being a landlocked country, most of our goods comes through Kenya.
Mombasa to be specific.
Yes, Mombasa to be specific. And definitely there could be hiccups because already we're accessing this from Kenya directly. And now the fact that now as a country we are able also to access from another source, which is actually also affordable. Yeah. Definitely the benefits are now limited for Kenya. Of course, now that is another area which needs bilateral between the summit members. That is the summit member. That is the president of Uganda and the president of Kenya. Because in this scenario, there are issues that have to be addressed at the bilateral way. Unless if they fail, but then they cannot fail at that level. They can either fail at our level as parliament, or even the ministers, but the summit must always have to resolve an issue. And that's why at the end of the day, most of the issues that are centered into law at the EAHC level by the summit of heads of states become automatically laws in the countries that are federating. Reason being, a lot of analysis would have already been made. So the East African law supersedes now the national laws. That's why it's normally when there are issues that come up, the member countries have to have taken a keen interest so that their interest first. Even when I'm at the East African Legislative Assembly, I do not forget the fact that I represent Uganda. Yeah. What are the common issues for Uganda? Then also the Rwandese think the same way. Eventually, we come into a compromise. So in this scenario of oil issues with Kenya, to be specific, having oil pass through Kenya to Uganda, I think that's an issue that can be addressed at the summit level.
Okay, just take us through what happens in Tanzania. I have an idea of how Ugandans do access labor in Kenya. It's a lot easier than it is in Tanzania. I don't know whether a conversation has come up at any one time during the debate for ease of incorporation of Ugandan workers into the Tanzanian economy. Can you give us an idea how that is? There have been concerns, for example, Ugandans do incorporate Kenyans and Tanzanians very easily when they want to take on jobs here, but Ugandans face a lot more scrutiny and a bit more constraints when seeking the same in Kenya and Tanzania. It's easier, a bit easier in Kenya. How is it in Tanzania?
Well, I think, like I said earlier, most of our member states are sovereign first.
Sovereign first.
Yes, and then two, most of our member states try to have interests of their nationals first. And in this scenario, whereas Uganda is quite really open, and first of all, like where I stay in the Machindi division. You find that Eritreans and Ethiopians are the majority of my neighbors now. Because Uganda has an open policy to refugees, and for basically our refugee policy is very good. So you find that from that background, even within the EAHC region, if our refugee policy allows, because in the world actually we are the second in the hospitality and hosting of the refugees. So if this is the background of Uganda already, it cannot be any different with now the federating member states. That's why you find that in Uganda it is very easier for Rwandese to come and start a business and own assets, and the same applies to Kenya. But if you, not to be specific, if you go to other countries, it will be extremely,
have you made enough
extremely hard.
For
yes, as a lawyer, because I wanted to do my law bar course in Arusha, in Tanzania, for example, where I am now, and there is still that hurdle whether you did your law in Makerere University or any university in Uganda or in Kenya, and whether you can also do your bar course in any of the East African
you haven't succeeded so far?
And it's taking a slow pace, but we continue to make noise, because that means if I did my bar in Tanzania or in Rwanda, although Kenya it's okay, or any of the federating member states, I could as well access opportunities within that area. But some economies are really too closed for their nationals that they do not want to have the other members working there. And Tanzania is one of that area. But I think those are some of the challenges we have to unpack. That's why our processes of legislations in the East African Legislative Assembly take a very low pace. Because despite the fact that the parliament passes and issue a bill, that bill has to go through scrutiny. By the time the heads of states are sent to a bill in the EAHC to call it a bill of the East African community, it means that it should have taken a rigorous process. Yes.
All right, that's perfectly understandable. I hope those sentiments can be addressed, especially by those that have the powers too. But we also implore you, as the Member of Parliament representing Uganda, to make a lot more noise for Ugandan interests, so that we get treated the same way we treat others here in the country. Many thanks, Honorable Jacqueline Amongin, for the perspective and also enlightening us on the goings on in Arusha. We do hope and wish you success with the bar course in Arusha. We do hope the powers are listening and will simplify things for you. All right, that will do it for Kickstarter, and right